Get started then.
Okay.
Welcome everybody to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And I'm proud and very excited that this is our 14th year of doing this in Northwest Indiana. And the only reason we're able to do this and we continue doing it is because of you and all of our organizational partners that make this possible. Want to share that these events are co-sponsored by Save the Dunes, Michigan City Sustainability Commission, plus Northwest Indiana Region Resilience. And our guest hosts this month are 95.1 FM AM 1420 WIMS. And I'm very excited to welcome Green Advocates for Responsible Development, otherwise known as GARD. So without further ado, then I will go ahead and hand this over to Em for some housekeeping items.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, just want to let everyone know that these meetings are being recorded because we put all of our Green Drinks meetings up on our Save the Dunes YouTube page for future viewing and sharing. So we ask that everyone remain muted during the presentation and leave any comments or questions here on the chat on Zoom. And we're also live on Facebook. So thank you for joining us on there if that's where you're watching from. And you can also leave comments or questions in the comments on the Facebook chat as well. Hopefully, we will have time at the end for questions. So, like I said, feel free to drop anything that comes to mind in the chat as it comes up, and we'll have time at the end to get to those.
Yes. And did you mention the people on Facebook Live can drop those in comments?
Yes, they can.
Okay. Thank you much.
Yes.
So I know you came for the program, and I would like to introduce our two presenters today. And the first is Jack Weinberg. He's a Green Steel advisor to Gary Advocates for Responsible Development, GARD. And he has an impressive background. He started out working in the steel mills, so he has that perspective. And then the last decades of his life, he spent as an environmental specialist, advocate, consultant, and he works in coordination with Dorreen Carey, who's also with us this evening. And she's the president and co-founder of GARD. And she's going to be sharing her commitment to advocacy after our question and answer period. And I just want to say I saw the presentation that was made by Indiana University on this very same topic. And I saw Jack's presentation at NERPC, and I had no question about who I wanted to come and present this evening because I felt that Jack had a much more in-depth analysis and knowledge of the topic. And also, since he's right here in Northwest Indiana, he really has a hands-on approach to understanding what's unique about our region. And I know that he'll voice the cautionary statement, but I'm going to say it right up front. It's time for us to transition to green steel, and that's for continued jobs for our workers, many of whom are family, friends, neighbors, and also for the ongoing economic viability of our region. So, Jack, without further ado, I'll hand the program over to you. And we're so excited that both you and Doreen are here with us this evening. So thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me. You know, I, my history actually goes back before my steelworking days, but I don't think that's an important thing. Although while I was a steelworker, I was one of the organizers of the Bailey Alliance, and in that context, I got to know Herb Reed and Charlotte Reed, who were leaders of the Save the Dunes movement. And they really were my mentors that brought me into environmentalism in the first place. And then after I left the steel mill, I had a 30-year career working in Asia, Africa, and international UN circles on questions related to pollution, public health, and industry transformation. And then when I finally retired, like the sixth time, Dorreen asked me to look into the issue of the steel industry, and there I went again. So I'm still going in my mid to late 80s, and we'll see how much longer it runs. I'm going to start. I'm going to start with an overview. Um, just sort of the big picture. Northwest Indiana steel mills use coal-based blast furnaces to make metal iron from iron ore. The blast furnace is a very old and very dirty technology, and most of the blast furnaces that are still operating in the United States are located in Northwest Indiana's three integrated iron and steel mills. Because of their blast furnaces, Northwest Indiana's iron and steel mills are among the world's largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and each is also in the top 10 or 20%, top 10 or 20 US sources of fine particulate emissions and their precursors, of ground level ozone precursors, and they're also major sources of toxic metal pollution and other hazardous air emissions. Based on GARD's research, we are convinced that blast furnaces in the United States will become obsolete by some time in the 2040s. We are convinced that blast furnaces will be replaced by the more modern, more efficient iron making technology that has now become available. That technology is called direct reduction. It's much cleaner than a blast furnace, and under US conditions is also more cost effective than a blast furnace. 20% of the country's iron is now made by direct reduction, and this percentage will rapidly grow. But it may take 15 years or so to build enough new direct reduction furnaces to fully replace the country's blast furnaces. And we understand the US economy needs iron, and the country's demand for iron is not very elastic. This means that at least some of the country's blast furnaces will remain in operation until sufficient alternate capacity has been built. This also means the country's blast furnace will be gradually replaced with DR furnaces. And unless Northwest Indiana's iron and steel mills receive the modernization investments that will be needed to replace their blast furnaces with direct reduction furnace soon enough, they too will become obsolete and be shut down. So that's an overview, and it's a big topic, and I'll try to get as much of it in as I can in the time we have. GARD has established a Green Steel Committee, and it advocates for the modernization of Northwest Indiana integrated and integrated iron and steel mills, and that specifically promotes the installation of direct reduction furnaces to replace their blast furnaces. And the twin goals of the campaign are to enable Northwest Indiana integrated mills to survive and prosper into the second half of the 20th century and beyond. And the second goal, equally important, maybe more important, is to reduce and eventually nearly eliminate the hazardous emissions and the greenhouse gas emissions from the Northwest Indiana's integrated iron and steel mills. From there, I'm going to go into some details. There are three integrated iron and steel mills in Northwest Indiana, and they're located along a 25-mile stretch of Lake Michigan's shoreline. Indiana Harbor Works in East Chicago, Gary Works in Gary, and Burns Harbor Works north of Portage. These three mills, taken together, produce 1/2 of all the iron that's currently being made in the United States, full half. They produce 15% of all the raw steel being made in the United States. There is no state in the country other than Indiana that produces this much steel. But it's important to know that steel is not just a single thing. There are thousands of different grades of steel, and for most steel products, lower grades of steel are plenty good enough. Northwest Indiana, however, does not produce, or once did, but it no longer produces the lower grades of steel. These are produced in mini mills from a feedstock that is either all recycled scrap or that is mostly recycled scrap. Although the amount of iron being used in mini mills is going up, but they're still not really producing very much of the steel that requires as much iron as Northwest Indiana's use. The steel mills in Northwest Indiana use a feedstock that's mainly virgin iron, 70% or more. And because of this, Northwest Indiana is the country's leading producer, it still is, of the specialized automotive and industrial grades of steel that cannot be made from recycled steel scrap, but they can only be made from the feedstock that is mainly virgin iron. So that's steel production. Now we'll talk about pollution. Northwest Indiana's three iron and steel mills are among the most polluting facilities in the United States. Together, the three of them emit 30 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. Nearly 2 tons of carbon dioxide for every 1 ton of steel they produce. To put the number 30 million tons into perspective, their carbon dioxide emissions are about the same as the carbon dioxide emissions from all the registered passenger vehicles in the entire state of Indiana. So I drive an electric vehicle and so forth, but these three mills put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than all the registered automobiles in the state of Indiana put together. Closer to home, they are among the country's top sources of health-harming air pollution. Each one of them is in the top 10 or 20% of the sources of fine particulate emissions and fine particulate emission precursors, ground level ozone precursors, carbon monoxide emissions, and numerous other toxic metals and other toxic pollutants. They're very polluting. As I say, they're among the most polluting facilities in the countries. And this pollution comes almost, not entirely, but almost entirely from their blast furnaces. If you look generally at the US steel industry as a whole, the steel mills that operated blast furnace produce less than 30% of the country's steel. But these same mills are responsible for 75% of the steel industry's greenhouse gas emissions, and they're responsible for even greater proportion of its health-harming emissions. The problem is not the steel mills, the problem is the blast furnaces. In January of this year, GARD released a report called The Future of Steelmaking in Northwest Indiana. The report reviews the changes the U.S. steel industry has come through since the 70s. It discusses the new technologies and trends, and it presents not so much the environmental reasons, which are very strong, but the economic and competitive reasons for why the U.S. steel industry will be transitioning from using blast furnaces to produce iron to using direct reduction furnaces to produce iron. And the report provided the basis for GARD's conclusion that region integrated steel mills are unlikely to survive for more than another 15 to 20 or more years unless they receive the modern investments that they will need to replace their blast furnace with a direct reduction furnace. And in the 6 months since that report came out, based on new things we've learned and new information that's emerged, the case is stronger now than it was then. Let me say a few things comparing blast furnaces with direct reduction furnaces. The emissions from the blast furnaces, some of it comes directly from the blast furnaces. A lot of it comes from burning the waste gases that the gas furnaces produce. And a lot of it also comes from the coke ovens and the sinter plants that they need to feed the blast furnaces. Direct reduction furnaces operate at lower temperatures than blast furnace, which right away makes them more energy efficient. They use no coal and no coke and no sinter. They will probably in the United States, almost all the new ones will start out using natural gas as their fuel and their reducing agent. But they can also use hydrogen, the newer ones, or they can also use natural gas and hydrogen in it in any combination. If they use natural gas, their carbon dioxide emissions are reduced by around 1/2 compared to a blast furnace. And their criteria and hazardous air pollutions, although there's less data on this, but it appears they'll be reduced by much more. But when green hydrogen becomes available and affordable at sufficient scale, and that will only happen when there's enough renewable electricity available, because green hydrogen is easily made from renewable electricity and water. But when it's available, the greenhouse gas emissions the same furnace can go to hydrogen. The greenhouse gas emissions can be nearly eliminated, and the hazardous emissions become quite minimal. Now, that's the basis on which we've been developing our campaign. And I could go into more details. I think U.S. Steel, we've been mainly in a dialogue with U.S. Steel because Nippon has indicated it's planning to spend $3.1 billion on investments in Gary Works, and they've committed about 800,000 or 900,000 of that. And we're saying there's enough money left over to install the first DR furnace and the additional technology that is needed in a steel mill to convert the the direct reduced iron into high grade steel. We say there's enough money to get started, and we want you to do that. And they're building DR furnaces now. They've announced the first DR furnace in Arkansas at their Big River Mill in Arkansas. Hyundai is building the first new integrated mill in the United States since the early 60s when Burns Harbor was built. And they're also using direct reduction furnaces at that mill. And more are coming. So we're saying we want direct reduction at Gary Works. It's the only way that Gary Works will survive. And it's there are things that they can do to reduce the pollution from Gary Works, and we want them to do that. There's nothing you can do with a blast furnace that can reduce its pollution by more than 30 to 45%. With spending a lot of money, that's sort of the upper bound based on any technology I know about. So they're still going to be horribly polluting no matter how much the money they put into trying to reduce the pollutions. If they put in DR furnaces, they can cut it in half right away. And then as green hydrogen becomes available, or really as green electricity becomes available, they can transition to lesser and lesser and lesser pollution. So that's what we want them to do. They reply in the press with all kinds of reasons why it's technically impossible. They've called us ignorant. They say that we have a secret agenda to shut down the steel mills, and on and on. We are prepared to, those technical questions are the easiest questions to answer. And if people want to talk more detail, ask questions, I can summarize the main arguments that U.S. Steel has been making in the press. We're still hoping. We've twice scheduled meetings to talk to them, and they've twice canceled, but we hope to enter into dialogue with them. But that's one of the questions we want to talk. The things that they're saying about why it's impossible don't hold water. And we don't want to talk to their PR people. We want to talk to their technical people, because we think we can have a good conversation. So that's what we're doing. Our goal, GARD's a small community-based organization. We're asking for billions of dollars of investments. At the end of the day, Nippon is not going to decide to make those investments unless they're convinced it's a good business case. And based on the information that we now have, and based on new developments in steel industry technology, we can outline the business case for why it's a good investment. But we don't have the credentials, we don't have the expertise. Our hope, and I'll end with this note and then I can take questions. Our hope is that we can build enough interest, enough support, enough understanding that maybe the state of Indiana, maybe the Northwest Indiana business community, or maybe somebody else will put up the resources needed to hire the experts, to do the research, to talk to the technology providers, to run the numbers, and to put together the sound business case that's good. Because what's happening, I'll end up on this. What's happening right now is, with the exception of the Chinese company steelmakers that are the dominant steelmakers in the world, all the other top steelmakers have their eye on the high performance steel market in the United States. That's why Nippon came in. That market in Japan is shrinking, and so they want to come into the United States because that market is still seen as growing and robust in the United States. So they want a piece of the market that Northwest Indiana supplies. POSCO, the big Korean company, has been trying to get some kind of arrangement with Cleveland Cliffs to do the same, because Cleveland Cliffs doesn't have the capital to make those kinds of investments. I don't know if POSCO does. The two big U.S. steelmaking companies, Nucor and Steel Dynamics, that have mainly been mini mill operators, have all made statements of their desire to come into this market. ArcelorMittal was in it, left, wants to come back, and Tata Steel will probably follow. So there's a lot of interest in the sector of the steel market that Northwest Indiana supplies. And up until now, the thought has been building new greenfield facilities is better than modernizing existing integrated iron and steel mills. I believe that equation is changing. I believe that the assets that the integrated steel mills like those in Northwest Indiana have are sufficient, and the cost of upgrading them is less. That is a better investment in business investment in the second half of the 20s, between now and 2030. It's a better business investment to invest in modernizing and upgrading a good integrated mill than it is to try to replace it with a greenfield mill at another location. And with that, I thank everybody, and I'm happy for questions.
And Jack, we do have time for you to go into more detail on that section that you skipped over. And you said, I can give more detail about this. So why don't we let you do that now? Because
Okay,
we definitely have the time, okay?
the problem, I'm happy to do it. The problem, people always complain that I always go too far into the weeds. Um, and,
This 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 group loves weeds, and we're always looking for the weeds.
okay,
So so please.
I'll say a few things. Um, these apply, Cleveland Cliffs and the Cleveland Cliffs mill is a much bigger problem than the U.S. steel mills, because Cleveland Cliffs has virtually no capital and no credit, or very little capital, very little credit. Any modernization would need a major partner or a sale of a facility. And I think there are, I think they have prospects, and I think POSCO has indicated an interest in doing something with them, but I think their strategy is they bought their integrated mills at a bargain basement price, and they just want to run them as long as they can and make the money they can out of them, and then shut them down when they're no longer viable. And I don't think they've ever been thinking of themselves making the modernization investments. And I don't know what it's going to take to convince them to look for a partner and modernize them. But Gary Works is different. And we have not yet had a direct conversation with U.S. Steel. As I say, with the help with the encouragement of Mayor Eddie Melton of Gary, they've twice set up meetings with us, and then the last minute they twice canceled, and there's talk now about setting up a meeting again. But I'm going to go into and there's a lot of things that we have to talk to them about, but I'm just going to go into what they say, what they say in the press, why what we're saying is wrong, why we don't. They say that Gary Works would need to install electric arc furnaces to convert the direct reduced iron into high-grade raw steel. It is true. They also say that direct reduced iron is different from steel. You still have to convert the steel. And it is true that you can't put the direct reduced iron into Gary's existing basic oxygen furnaces. But you don't have to install electric arc furnaces. That's what some mills that are converting to DR iron are doing. But the big German steelmaker ThyssenKrupp is doing something different. And what they're doing, we think will become the new the new best technology. And that is what they're doing is if you take the steel, the iron that comes out of a direct reduced iron furnace, the iron ore is never melted. The iron is never melted. It comes out as a spongy form of iron that's got some amount of silica, alumina around it, and you can't put that in a direct. You can't put that. You can't do that. What ThyssenKrupp is doing and what several companies are now starting to talk about doing for other reasons is using an electric smelting furnace. You take the direct reduced iron, you put it in a furnace, you melt it, you clean it. You can then put it directly into the mill's existing basic oxygen furnaces, or what a lot of money is now being invested in, including the Republican candidate for governor of Ohio, Ramsworthy. They're investing in developing direct reduction facilities that then smelt the iron, smelt the DR, and then sell it by what they call it pig iron. So if Gary were, so they could go either way. They could put in electric arc furnaces, but they could also put in the smelting furnaces. If they do that, then the molten and cleansed DR iron can be fed directly into the existing basic oxygen furnaces, and from there it can just go into the slab casters, and so that's a very that appears to be the more cost-effective, efficient way. They also say that if you use DR iron, you can't make all the steel products that Gary Works currently makes, and that may be true for electric arc furnaces. Again, does not appear to be true if you go the smelting furnace route. There's not much difference between the smelted DR iron and the pig iron. If anything, the smelted DR iron is a little better for that purpose. So they're saying you can't make those products. They can. They also say that if you install DR furnaces at Gary Works, it would take a long time, and they'd have to shut the mill down and lay everybody off while they're doing it, and then they lose all their business, etc. There have been several mills that are at various stages in conversion. Every one of them is installing the DR furnaces one at a time. They're keeping their blast furnaces operating while the installation is going on, and they only shut down a blast furnace after the DR furnace has been producing and it is now producing. So there's no need to shut it down for even one day. And the notion of shutting it down for 2 years would be stupid, and nobody else is doing it. Another thing they say is that the DR pellets, the pellets that are used to make the direct reduced iron that's used in electric arc furnaces has to be very high percentage of iron. And they say that they have capacity to do that, but basically they've committed all the capacity they have to Big River, and they don't have the capacity to produce enough DR ready pellets for Gary Works. Again, that's true if you're putting it into an electric arc furnace. If you use electric smelting furnaces instead, you can. It's being used in some places to take very low grade iron ore, because once you put in the smelting furnaces, you remove the impurities, and the impurities are poisonous to an electric arc furnace. Those impurities produce slag. When the slag gets beyond a certain level, the conversions efficiencies drop, and so on and so forth. I can go in more detail. So again, we think we're not going to tell. We're not the experts. They could decide how they want to convert the iron into steel at Gary Works, but they're not. They just tell us there's one way to do it, even though everything that we said, everything we've written, everything that everybody else, everything that, not everybody, everything that, the report that came from IU, they all say the same thing. There are two ways. You can do with electric arc furnaces, you can do with smelting furnaces. And so we think they have to give a closer look to that. I could go on, but in other words, we'd like to have a conversation with our technical people. We think the things they're saying are not true. If we're wrong, we'd like them to, we don't want to have a stupid argument. We don't want to just argue with them in the press. If we're wrong, we want them to tell us we're wrong. We want to listen to them. And that's true about every other question. Our goal, however hostile it might seem, our goal is that we want an intelligent, respectful dialogue with US Steel. We want to raise it up to reach the people in Nippon. And our goal in the end of the day is we want to build the support. We want to get enough support to have the experts to do the research and to make the case that modernizing Gary Works, modernizing the other two mills, is a more cost-effective way of maintaining your position or building a position in these high-grade steel markets than building new facilities at other locations at a greenfield site from scratch. I hope that has, I don't know how much that elucidated, but I'm now ready to answer questions.
Doreen, did you want to share anything before we get into questions?
Well, I thought maybe people would want to ask their questions and then I can talk more about GARD generally after
Okay.
that.
Yeah, we'll let everyone. Thank you, Jack. That was extremely informative and well put together. It was my first time hearing your presentation, so thank you for sharing all of that information with us. We do have a couple of questions. Monica is curious as to whether or not the National Parks Conservation Organization could start a campaign to amplify GARD's position. So maybe a curiosity around partnering with larger partnered organizations that have done advocacy work for cleaner green steel or other initiatives.
There is no franchise on this. GARD has been trying to start something. We understand that forces much bigger than us will need to come into play. We would be happy to cooperate and help and do everything we can to help anybody else to join this. We've been talking to, we've had our earliest conversations with Congressman Mervan, and he's at least hearing us and listening to us. And he asked US Steel some questions during the last Steel Caucus hearing about these issues. So we're trying to build support. We have not yet, we think that even though we live in a Republican state, Indiana has an interest in defending its industrial economy and not facing the same deindustrialization that other states are facing. The steel industry Indiana is the country's leading steelmaking state, and not by just a small amount. In addition to the three integrated mills in Northwest Indiana, it has some major Nucor and Steel Dynamics also have major facilities in Indiana. Indiana could become a champion of the green steel transition. It's good for the state's economy. If you lose the steel industry, the auto industry might go next, and so on and so forth. So we want to build the broadest possible coalition, and we want to keep it civil. We want to keep it respectable, and we want to convince US Steel, and it'll be harder to convince Cleveland Cliffs because they don't have the money to do this and they feel more threatened. We want to convince, but I hope we can convince them too to find the partners they need. But I think that Nippon has the capital, has in its most recent annual general meeting last month, it says that it made the analysis of why the U.S. market for the highest grades of steel is so important. And it says it plans to continue investing more into expanding its footprint in this market.
We kind of led a little into the next question about Indiana politics, or has Braun weighed in on cleaner steel manufacturing technology? Question from
Several,
Brian.
not that I know of, several people that I don't have a big background in politics. As I say, for the last 20 some years, I've been working more in Africa and Asia than I have in the United States with on pollution issues there. I don't have a lot of background. People tell me they're reaching out to Braun. There's people who say they've talked to him or to some of his associates. There are people in Northwest Indiana who do talk to him. Anybody who can help get his ear, we'd love it to happen. We have a big, tough case to make, and we need not just to convince more people to come on board, but we also have to increase the literacy on these issues so more people in Northwest Indiana understand the steel industry better and can talk about these things. I'm so surprised that people in Northwest Indiana, so many people I talk to, don't know the difference between the steel that goes into making rebar for concrete and the steel that Northwest Indiana makes. People don't know the role of iron in steel making. They don't know what's special about what's become special. Our mills once made all kinds of steel. Now they're specialty mills that make the highest grade of steel, the most profitable potentially steel, and we want to keep them. So we need to build the literacy, we need to build the understanding, and we need to build the support. And I don't underestimate the difficulty that will be.
Thank you. That's our questions. We got another one. Has anyone heard or read Professor Muller's report measuring legacy pollution's burden on Northwest Indiana? Will this report provide support for the case for green steel? And then shared a link in the chat.
Yeah, I was at the meeting where he released the report, and we had some conversations with him on Zoom or by phone. I don't remember which before. His case is alarming. In fact, until his report was released, U.S. Steel would respond to these issues, and Cleveland Cliffs just said nothing. And Cleveland Cliffs came out with all guns blazing in their statement to the Post Tribune after that report came out, because it's damning. The report is based on a methodology that the U.S. EPA and others have used. And the Mueller, who is the author of the report, is at an institution, is at a center at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh that pioneered, he didn't do it personally, but his mentor pioneered the methodology. And what they do is they take the EPA emissions, EPA record, national emissions inventory, and they look at the emissions from various facilities. And then they put this into a model that has all the weather patterns of the area, and they calculate based on the emissions and the weather patterns and the stack heights and other things where those emissions will travel to, what effect they'll have on air quality, and what effect they will have on human health. They translate that on the number of excess deaths that are caused by that. And what the report does is they started with 20 facilities on the lower shore of in Northwest Indiana, and then they whittled it down to 7 biggest polluters in this region, and for each facility they calculated the number of premature deaths that would occur from their pollution and the communities in which those premature deaths would occur. And although U.S. Steel and Cleveland Cliffs, U.S. Steel responded the way they always respond, was nothing exceptional. Cleveland Cliffs responded basically with a call to war, threatening that the people want to shut down the mills and how the workers won't stand for it, and getting ready to do what they did in Middletown, Ohio. Oh, excuse me. Getting ready to do what they did in Middletown, Ohio, when these questions are raised, and they mobilized workers, told them their jobs were at stake, and so on and so forth. So there, I expect some pretty nasty response. I'm hoping not. I expect a really firm response from Cleveland Cliffs because they're threatened. But not a single five companies responded to the report. Not one of them questioned or challenged the findings of the deaths from their mill. All of them said, we're following all the laws, we're doing a good thing, etc. So yeah, his report is startling. It's actually the kind of thing that can, the kind of information that would stand up in a lawsuit or in a hearing in front of the EPA. And it's one more of the indications that as the medical and scientific knowledge about the effects of steel mill pollution grows, the ability to continue defending these polluting facilities shrinks. And so even the report that we put out, that GARD put out in January, because it was right after Trump came into office, we left out all the environmental and public health reasons why the DR furnaces would replace blast furnaces, and we focused on the economic and competitive reasons. But the environmental and public health reasons are overwhelming. There's no, as more and more greener iron making things come into play, there's just no way that anybody's going to keep on, maybe blast furnaces might have 10 more years in this country. They might have 15 more years, but they're going. And steelmaking will become cleaner and greener than it is today. The question that we have to deal with is how fast is it going to happen, and will we share the benefits of a cleaner and greener steel industry?
Thank you. A question from Monica here. A legacy pollutions, is that another name for turning the shore into a sacrifice zone? Meaning they run the facility into the ground and then leave the slop behind.
I don't think that was Mueller's intent. I do think that's clearly been U.S. Steel, not U.S. Steel. Cleveland Cliffs bought those integrated mills for an extremely low price because, for whatever reason, ArcelorMittal decided that the future was elsewhere. And I think that I'm not sure that the people at ArcelorMittal who made that decision, those decisions are still there, but I don't know that for sure. But Nippon wants to be in the steel business and wants to be in the steel business of the United States and wants to be in the high quality, high grade steel, higher grade steel business. And I think the challenge there is they don't have any historic relationship in Northwest Indiana, but I think we can convince them, or we should convince them, but it'll take resources beyond what GARD has. But I think they can be convinced, because I think the case is there that it's a better investment to upgrade Gary Works than it is to scrap all of the valuable asset Gary Works has and build all those assets somewhere else. And I think that's the case we have to make. And there's the moral arguments. There's the arguments that, we've been making steel here for 100 years. People came here from all over the world, from the South, from Appalachia, from Southern and Eastern Europe, from Mexico, where people came here to build a better future for their families, that so many of the residents of Northwest Indiana are descendants of those people. Now that the steel industry is getting greener and cleaner, shouldn't they benefit? Should it go somewhere else? Those are strong moral arguments. They can raise people's strength of commitment to preserve our region's steel industry. But at the end of the day, Nippon's going to respond to a business case. Nippon's going to respond to what makes good business sense for them. And our job is to do all the things needed for them to reach the conclusion that it's a good business argument, whether that's regulations that reach that conclusion, whether it's political pressure, whether it's intellectual things, whether it's reports, whether it's studies. We have to convince Nippon Steel that, and we have to look for opportunities for Cleveland-Cliffs to find the partners or the resources that would be needed, or to sell off assets, or whatever is needed to modernize its mills as well, and not just run them into the ground.
I think this is the perfect transition point, and Em, we can forget about my question because this is a perfect handoff to Dorreen and Jack. I've never seen such a beautiful transition, summary and transition in my whole life. So thank you. Dorreen?
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, Jack. Yes. So, and thanks to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks for having us here this evening. So I'm Dorreen Carey. I'm president of the board of Gary Advocates for Responsible Development, or GARD. And I've been a community activist and environmental activist all my life, really. And I'm a 47-year resident of the city of Gary. So GARD itself is a nonprofit community-based organization. Our mission is to promote economic development in the city of Gary that prioritizes environmental justice, community health, protection of our neighborhoods, and our natural resources. So we know that to achieve these goals, we need to have cleaner air, land, and water, and environmentally sustainable economic development that supports jobs, housing, and businesses that are protective of community health and our globally unique natural resources. We hope through our work to provide a foundation for community education and engagement and actions that will contribute to making Gary a healthy and sustainable city now and into the future. So I have a few more things to say about our background here. So just to let you know how we got started, in the fall of 2021, a small group of longtime Gary residents and activists formed an ad hoc committee, and we called it Gary Advocates for Responsible Development, or GARD. And the reason was to oppose a fulcrum company who wanted to come to Gary to construct an unproven and untested garbage to jet fuel plant on our Lake Michigan shoreline. And it was important to impose this fulcrum plant because Gary didn't need another polluting business that would truck in millions of tons of garbage from other cities while creating millions of tons of air pollution, trying to make fuel by cooking garbage at high heat. So we did high-level research and produced white papers explaining the problem with the proposal and why the operation would not be successful. We went to community and council meetings to communicate the issue to the public. And we were able to recruit the Environmental Law and Policy Center to represent us pro bono on our administrative challenge to the IDEM permit issued to that company. And after 3 years of research, community engagement, and legal action by GARD and supporters, the Fulcrum project self-destructed as we predicted. Their pilot project outside Reno, Nevada failed to produce product. The plant closed. Fulcrum defaulted on loans and went bankrupt, and investors lost money. And finally, in response to Fulcrum's failure and the legal pressure from GARD and our attorneys, IDEM actually revoked the air permit they issued for construction of the Fulcrum plant in Gary. Yay. So in the course of our work there to stop Fulcrum, GARD, we realized that there needed to be an ongoing Gary community-based organization to monitor and take action on the many existing and proposed new sources of health and natural resource harming pollution in Gary. And so for the past 5 years, GARD's volunteer board of directors and community supporters have attended monthly city council and city administration meetings to monitor development proposals. We work with residents to oppose zoning changes that would allow trucking operations to locate in their residential neighborhoods. And with the support of Environmental Law and Policy Center and the Conservation Law Center, we provide expert comments on industry permits and advance legal challenges where necessary. In 2024, our application for 501c3 nonprofit status was approved, and we were able to begin fundraising to support our work. You have heard this evening about the work of our Green Steel Committee that has resulted in local, state, national, and international support for investing in green steel and modernization at Gary Works. So in June, we were able to hire our first community organizer project manager, staff person, who is with us here tonight. So I just want you to see and wave at LaTanya Woodson, who has been working with us now for 2 months, and we really loved having her with us and helping. So finally, GARD has just completed the first phase of a project to reimagine Gary's industrial lakefront using interactive maps of the shoreline to identify potential locations for the implementation of green infrastructure, natural solutions, such as green buffers to protect Lake Michigan, roadway trees, bioswales, and native plantings for area landscaping. And thank you to Save the Dunes staff for serving on our advisory steering committee for that. And there'll be more on all this later. So you can follow us on Facebook or see our project progress on our webpage at garygard219.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. I'm just going to drop a couple of links for GARD in the chat here. So if anyone wants to follow y'all on Facebook, that's in the chat. And yeah, thank you. I think we don't have any other questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to mention that GARD had a victory this week at the Gary City Council meeting, that they saw the passage of resolution for green steel within their community. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And again, that was a result of our ongoing communications with city council members and residents that really put the urge in there for them to make this resolution, and they're going to share it widely throughout communities in Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, and to say that Mayor of Gary, Eddie Belton, has been very supportive of GARD. He's not there out there as an advocate, but he understands these issues. I've been told that he endorsed the resolution was passed unanimously, and it's a very comprehensive resolution. I'm told that he has also supported it. It's being sent to the CEO of Nippon in Japanese, translated by some of our colleagues in Japan who are also working on green steel. And it just goes on, and we're lonely, and we want more friends, and we want more allies, and we hope that the Save the Dunes Council, and we hope that all the other organizations that are represented in this call find some way to join this fight.
Thank you. And I think that's another great transition. So we'll be moving into announcements. We always like to let our attendees know about upcoming events that are happening. I'm going to share mine first, Em, if that's okay, so I don't forget. This is another really wonderful green partner in Michigan City on Hitachi Global and Sinclair. No, that's not right. Okay, I'm just going to go with Hitachi Global. They're having a ribbon cutting and a guided tour of a woodland area that they have actually sponsored and paid to have done at the Friendship Botanic Gardens. So on Thursday, August 27th, from 1:45 p.m. actually, They're going to be recognizing this partnership between them and Hitachi Global. So want to invite everybody to come to that. If you haven't been to the Friendship Botanic Gardens, they're beautiful. Half of them are formal garden, and then the other half is a natural area with trails and pathways through it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Em?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I've got lots of upcoming events for Save the Dunes on the docket. Summer is not over, so there's still plenty of time to get out and enjoy. I want to share my upcoming event, and that's next is through our NWI Thrive funding, which is great. Investment coming down from Legacy and Lilly Foundation to bring folks out into the green spaces and parks via greenways and trails. So we'll be hosting Bike Northwest Indiana in collaboration with Bike the Dunes, which is a local bike vendor that's located at the Indiana Dunes Visitor Center. And that'll be on Friday, August 14th. Beginning at 10 a.m. Registration is required and bikes are provided by Bike the Dunes if you need. And we're going to go out and explore the Kankakee Trail, take a stop at the Dune Park South Shore Station and see some of the improvements that have happened at the train station, and then take to the Marquette Greenway and explore one of the newer paved portions westbound on the Marquette Greenway from Dune Park. And then we also have coming up our Jammin' with Save the Dunes, which is our annual fundraiser that is part music festival, part good cause hangout fundraiser down on the lakefront. That's happening on Saturday, September 19th, and tickets for those are available. You won't want to miss the VIP ticket tour, which includes a boat ride on the Amita, which takes you out onto the lake with great views of Mount Baldy. And we'll have a national park ranger giving some information about the park in a different viewpoint from out on the water. So that is a really fun event to attend. And I dropped the link to all of our other events in the chat, so please check them out. And then I'm also going to drop the link for our YouTube page. As I mentioned in the beginning of the call, all of our green drinks plus other free resources are on our YouTube page. And this event recording will be up, by early next week. So if it really intrigued you and you know some community members, friends, family, colleagues that would benefit from hearing from Jack and Dorreen, please feel free to share that there and widely with your networks.
Okay, I wanted to ask if either Kathy or Jacob had any events to share from the NERPC meeting that they attended this morning. I wanted to give them an opportunity to do that. Okay. Then I want to announce our next green drinks, and I'm very excited about this one. It's happening, of course, the first Thursday of the month, September 3rd. We're going to have a very rare opportunity of an artist joining up with the biologist. And Laurel Izzard does these wonderful quilts of endangered or extinct animals, and they're beautiful. And she's going to be joining up with Susan Kurt, who is just a very recent member of the board with Save the Dunes, and she's the biologist. So they're going to be doing a back and forth exchange of being able to see these beautiful animals portrayed on these gorgeous quilts. And then Susan is going to be talking about these animals so we can learn more about them. So please join us for that event. Again, Zoom, Facebook Live on Save the Dunes page. And I know M's very excited because every year we've been trying to do an arts type green drinks because M is very much an artist herself. So, okay.
Wonderful.
Wonderful evening. Thank you all for attending. Really, it's because of you and your contributions to your communities and your involvement with your family, friends, your neighbors. It's through these relationships that we're really making a difference for our worlds, whether we're looking at it locally, in the micro sense, or we're looking at it globally, in the world sense. So just from the bottom of my heart, just genuine gratitude to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Doreen and Jack.
Yeah.
Hope
Glad to
everyone has
be
a
here.
great night, and we'll see you next month.